Hello, hello, hello. We are previewing Orlando City's away match in Chicago this Sunday. I believe kickoff is at 4 p.m. Eastern, about 3 p.m. Central. A lot going on in Chicago at the transfer window. I'm excited to hear Guillermo's take. Not much going on last weekend with the Orlando City game and that performance. Nothing I really want to talk about. Ron, do you want any final thoughts about the game versus Seattle?
Um, it was a kind of a rude awakening for Jason Kreis that he got off to a good start with the victory. He went with the same lineup, which I didn't agree with. Like I said after the New England victory that I didn't think this lineup, be happy about the win, but I didn't think it was the lineup going forward, and I think it showed that. But some of that's down to the injury to Tommy Redding. So hopefully we can get some of our better players back, so OC can hopefully find some consistency soon because they're just so up and down from week to week.
All right, and Guillermo, just jump right in and tell us all about Chicago because I bet very few people watching this know other than you passed on another good player. If I feel like you guys just pass, what's going on here?
Personally, I'm not really that bent out of shape about the pass on Alejandro Bedoya. I think he's a good player. I don't know that he would have made a difference for the Fire as far as getting them into a position any better than they are right now by adding him. They still need a midfielder who can control the center of the pitch. They still need a target forward, and maybe this David Arshakian is a guy who can provide some of what they're missing up front. But I don't think Bedoya is going to address, or at least address enough of the holes they need to fill. If they've got a plan to bring in um, someone of higher quality than Alejandro Bedoya in the January window, then I think that remains to be seen. They were able to get some more of their favorite MLS Garber bucks to add to their pile of allocation money for buying down players and buying down the budget costs going into the next transfer window. But I'm sure Alejandro Bedoya would have helped, but I don't think he would have made the Fire appreciably better than they are now. I don't think he would have made them a playoff contender, put it that way. So you weigh that, and then you weigh whether or not you want to spend $1 million in a transfer fee for Bedoya. You have to weigh if you want to spend $1 million in salary on Alejandro Bedoya. And I think they looked at that and said, well, if we're going to spend that kind of money, we can get more production in spaces that we need going forward. So I think that was the thinking, and I can't say I necessarily disagree with it this time.
All right, and what about Igbugan? I can never pronounce his name. Igbuganike to DC.
You won't even have to talk about Kennedy Iguananike anymore. He's on his way to DC, and again, it's another move for targeted allocation money. They weren't going to bring Iguananike back next year. He had an option at the end of the year. He was expensive. I think if they would have brought him back here, they would have tried to bring him back at an incredibly reduced price. Like I said, he wasn't going to be with the Fire in 2017, most likely. So they know they're not going anywhere, so they made a move, and instead of just releasing or declining the option in 2017, they moved him to DC and got a little bit of allocation money for him. Again, I can't quibble with that either. I think it was going to be tough for Iguananike to fit in with what they're doing now with Michael Deliu sort of playing or looking to play that playmaking role, and now with David Arshakian coming in as a target forward, Iguananike is not really effective as a right-sided midfielder, so there wasn't a whole lot of place for him to play. And they made a move. I mean, he was making $900,000 a year, which is a lot more money than the production he was providing them. They're still on the hook for some of that budget cost in the second half here, so made a move to get him off the roster, and that's all it boils down to.
All right, and you want to touch on your loss last night in Open Cup? How'd you guys look?
Not very good. I think it disappointed a lot of supporters because they, for the last 3 weeks or so, have been building up to this and have sort of focused all of their energy and all their attention to gear up for this game, and they came out flat, almost like it was another one of the typical Fire away games, and just didn't have what it took to take control of that game early. I thought they were a little bit too reserved, a little bit too defensive. They made an error with a Rodrigo Ramos kick out against Kellen Rowe that was a legitimate penalty. You can't kick a guy in the shins, even if you miss, and take a swipe like that in the penalty area because you're going to get called for it. That set him back on their heels, and it was downhill from there. David Accam gave them a little bit of life. But like they have done for the better part of the last 7 years, they quickly dashed any hopes of uh, winning that game by giving up a goal 90 seconds after Accam tied it. They did a little bit better in the second half, but again, very disappointing that they spent all of their energy, took all of their energy, and spent all the time gearing up for this game, and really looked like they weren't prepared for it.
All right, and do you have any other general sentiments about Chicago's form coming into this home match versus Orlando?
Well, they haven't played terribly at home. The draw against New York Red Bulls a little over a week ago, or last the last home game wasn't a bad game. They ended up with a 2-2 draw and probably should have won that game. But again, like they've done so many times over the last 7 years, gave up a late goal and um, snatched another victory or dropped another 2 points at home. They have, I think, have a decent unbeaten streak at home right now, so they have been better, but they're at the point where they need to win every home game, and I think we know how bad they have been on the road, almost historically bad. Um, we had a stat the other day that they are now, after the U.S. Open Cup loss, they are 4 losses or ties away from equaling the all-time record for consecutive winless games by any North American professional sports franchise in the major leagues.
Wow.
It's rather incredible.
Oh man! All right.
It's amazing. They
Well,
haven't won a road game in over 2 years, but they've been better at home. So I'd say Orlando hasn't been in a good run of form either. So that could be the reason why ESPN2 dropped this broadcast from Orlando.
yeah, we got relegated to Una Mas for our team's
Yeah,
performances.
not even Unimas, Univision Deportes is carrying that game. So it's relegated to the third league.
And the way Orlando plays defense, that is probably where we deserve to be. Anyway, Ron, we saw the 4-2-3-1 in both Chris's games. So what do you think about this week's formation?
Uh, I can't imagine they'd go from it. This team, before Christ got here, is made up of a bunch of players that kind of, it's hard to say specialized. We joked about this before the show, but these players are fit into a 4-2-3-1. A lot of them, guys like Christian Higuita, that they're specifically defensive mids in a 4-2-3-1 system. Guys like that. So I don't see the system change much. I think you'll see the same formation. I think we'll see actually somewhat of a similar team than we've seen the past couple weeks. The good news is that Tommy Redding, Rafael Ramos, Kevin Molino have a chance to all be back for this game. Those are, with Molino and Redding, they're two of our more important players, especially Molino, obviously, with 9 goals and 7 assists on the year. He's been pretty prolific in the attacking end. But as our defense was on display last week, when we don't have Tommy Redding in there, we lack a lot of athleticism. And going up against David Accam is a scary thought, no matter who you got back there. But when you have the likes of Seb Hines and David Mateos and Luke Bowden and Kevin Alston, nobody's going to slow David Accam down. So hopefully we get Ramos back on the right. Bowden will probably have to play left by default the rest of the year. Redding, and I would assume he would pair up with Hines again, just because I don't think they're going to put Redding and Aja in there together at the same time in the very first game. And then I expect him to stick with Nocerino and Carrasco again. That seems to be his preferred defensive mid pairing. I don't agree with it, but if that's what Christ wants to go with, I think you have to give him more than 2 games to prove that that's the pairing. I think this constant switching back and forth has led to Orlando City's inconsistency over the season, and that has to do with both coaches, Heath and Christ. And then up top, I think you see Kaká and Larin in the middle, and Molino should come back in on the right, and I assume you'll see Breck Shea again on the left, at least for the first half. We'll see how he plays.
All right. Very little disagreement from me. I would love to see Redding and Aja in the middle, just because. Yeah. Okay. So not even disagreement, just an alternate view take. Just because what we've had in the middle has been just atrocious. Ladero looked, I don't know, like some of the passes he strung together for Seattle last week, where it just looked like kind of like a passing drill to me. Um, and across the middle, I think Ron's pretty much right. If we don't see Molino, because I don't really trust whatever injury reports are given to us, I think that's a league-wide thing, not an Orlando thing. I would really like to see Baptista get some more playing time, whether he be on the right or in the middle and Kakabi on the right, I don't know, but that's for the coach's choice. But I really think Baptista's put in some solid performances. So, Guillermo, I know you guys style of play is the counter. I believe you do it from a 4-2-3-1. How is your lineup going to look coming off the Open Cup game? Because I think you fielded a pretty strong team despite the result.
Yeah, they had most of their first choice starters out for the U.S. Open Cup game. I think you'll see Sean Johnson back in goal on Sunday. More than likely, Matt Polster back in one of the center mid spots. They have been running a 4-2-3-1. That's what I expect we'll see on Sunday. They're not going to have the newer signing, David Arshakian, probably until next week. So we'll likely see Michael DeLue up top with either Arturo Alvarez or John Goosens behind him, like he did in the U.S. Open Cup. They had Razvan Kocic and Kelly Thiam in the center mid spots for the U.S. Open Cup game. I suspect Polster will replace Sham, who really did not play well on Tuesday, and he's really hasn't had many very good games since coming over earlier this season. He's a guy that is a younger guy they brought over with an option to buy for 2017, and I don't think he's really established himself as a guy that you would say, okay, this is a guy that we automatically want next year. I think what you're going to see out of the Fire over the next 13 games is basically an audition for 2017. I think you'll probably see a pretty strong or close to the first choice starting 11. I don't think they're going to throw in the towel just yet and just start playing youngsters. You're going to see the regular back four more than likely with Brandon Vincent, Johan Kappelhoff, Jonathan Campbell, and either Ramos or Michael Harrington on the back. More than likely Kocic and Polster in front of them, and that area in front of the back four is probably where the Fire had the most issue defending and getting the ball into the attack all year. Center mids haven't been terrible individually, but I think they just haven't been effective in any combination from the middle of the field. In the center, I think you'll see John Goosens and Alvarez with, again, a Akam out on the left, who is one of the few guys who showed up for that U.S. Open Cup game yesterday and is, like Ron said, he's a handful for any MLS defender.
Yeah, and Chicago was a bogey team for us last year. I think you guys had some of your best results against us, as I recall. So do you think that you'll be able to keep up last year's form versus Orlando versus us this time?
Well, it's a home game, and like I said, they've played relatively well for them at home. It depends on how they bounce back mentally from the U.S. Open Cup loss. They have been gearing all of their energy toward this U.S. Open Cup game, and I think we're going to see how they bounce back from this. I think mentally they're going to know that the playoffs aren't a reality, and there isn't a whole lot to play for. This game, or losing this U.S. Open Cup game, should be a huge letdown for them, and we'll see how they bounce back. I think Sunday is it's a game that predicting MLS games is a fool's game if you're a gambler, but I think this game can go either way. Neither one of the two teams are playing exceptionally well.
And in your opinion, do you think that the Fire have the mental toughness to, at least put together a strong performance? And do you think that the new head coach this year has had any, overall bearing on the team's mental makeup?
I think they've been better, and they've been tougher than they were last year. Have been the last 2 years under Frank Yallop. That being said, the results are still what they are. They're not a whole lot better than what Yallop was able to get out of them. It seems like they're more organized. There's a little bit more of a focus than there was under Yallop. I think Paunovic has done okay with the cards he's been dealt. This is not a very good roster, and I don't think there were many people who expected them to make a run for anything serious going into the season. But again, there are some pieces there, and they should be a little bit better than they are, but they're not. They're just they're missing too much in the center of midfield. They haven't had a reliable forward. I think Michael DeLue looks like a guy who's going to be a quality player, but the attackers haven't been able to do much without some help from the midfield. They're just not getting it.
Yeah, and I think no matter what the player is, you got to have some time for adjustment to the MLS because it's a different league. So I mean, I think pretty much every player who comes over has at least a little bit of an adjustment period.
It is. You see that the good players don't take very long to adjust now.
Right. All right. And so now Ron, into Orlando. As I mentioned before, Chicago was a bogey team for us last year. So, I know Akam is a handful. He always gets us on the counter. It seems that he scores against us every week. What do you think we got to do?
Well, we might have to outscore them. I mean, I fully expect Akam to score. If he doesn't score, he's probably going to set up a goal unless Chicago just has no will to play tough at all or fight for the badge or whatever cliche you want to use. Orlando City has only won one game on the road this year, so it's hard to predict that they would do.
Those are huge numbers, Ron, because Fire are zero over the last 2 years.
But yeah, I mean, Chicago and Orlando have actually played each other pretty even over the course of these first year and a half that Orlando City's been in MLS. But stopping Akam, I mean, I don't know that you can do that. I don't see teams, even when Chicago loses 3-1. I mean, Akam still gets his. It seems like. So getting Ramos back would be a huge boost for just the athleticism that he could maybe stay with him. I mean, I don't think. Kevin Olsen gets beat backdoor like it's his job. So if David Akam runs at him, I expect the same thing to happen. Kind of like Jordan Morris or Clint Dempsey or Ladero, whoever really wants to do it against Kevin Olsen. I expect them to do it. So. I don't know that you contain Akam, but maybe they'll just have to outscore him. I mean, it seems like Orlando City has to outscore opponents because they're too fragile and too vulnerable at the back right now.
Yeah, from the Fire's end, they've been fairly decent defensively. They do play conservatively and they do play for the counter. And part of the problem early in the year is they got too conservative and sacrificed a lot of their offense. For the sake of protecting the back line and protecting Matt Lamson, who struggled on and off. I think that people in Chicago are a little bit miffed that Sean Johnson isn't the automatic starter over Lamson, but Lamson got a nice run at the start of the season. He's been the goalkeeper for the U.S. Open Cup games. I think you'll probably see Sean Johnson back in goal. Like I said on Sunday, they have been fairly organized and fairly tough to break down at home for the most part. They just haven't been able to generate offense consistently anywhere, home or road.
This game to me, it seems like it's going to be strength versus strength because, as Ron said, our strength is going forward, and as you've said, your strength is in the back. So at least you get both teams kind of butting heads with their stronger units. So it could be quite entertaining. Ron, you have any other general points about Orlando or this matchup?
No, I think the defensive mids need to play a bigger part for Orlando City. I think Orlando City. I mean, what really concerned me about last week is Jason Kreis said after the game that the defenders played like an offside trap, and he had never told them to do that, and there was a lot of confusion there. So I think that's something to look for this week. If they play anything remotely close to that Seattle game, they managed to combine a high defensive line / offside trap with no ball pressure whatsoever on Seattle, which basically just lets Seattle have all day on the ball, and they could pick out passes over the top. If for some reason they let Chicago have that kind of space and attempt to play a high line, then I think even Chicago can exploit this defense. Chicago, I think I just saw, has only got about 20 goals in 21 games, so they're obviously not an offensive force. But we have a knack for helping teams that are in a poor form come alive. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen up there. But every road match scares me with Orlando City. Like I said, only one win this year. So I mean, if they get a point on the road, I'm usually ecstatic.
Yeah, the high line against a guy like Akam is sort of asking for trouble. I think teams have been successful by kind of sitting back and trying to get in front of him, maybe bumping him a little bit, grabbing him a little bit, trying to frustrate him. I think trying to play a high line against him is playing into playing into his hand and asking for trouble.
And I just have one last question for you, Guillermo, and then if Ron has any questions for you, we'll do that. And if you have anything else, otherwise we'll conclude. But realistically, how long do you think Chicago can hang on to a Calm? Because he's young, he's clearly the best player on your team. He's clearly one of the best players in the MLF. If he had any kind of other supporting cast around him, he'd be even that much better.
Well, he's got another guaranteed year on his deal, and the Fire have another option for a year after that. They have been talking to him for the last probably several months about signing a long-term deal. He has expressed some interest in playing in a bigger league or playing overseas again. He had some interest from Stoke City this past winter. He did not have the caps or the international games under his belt to qualify for a work permit in the UK. So that quashed that idea. I think it's still possible that maybe another league in Europe makes a run at him. It depends on what kind of offers he gets and where he wants to be in a couple of years. I think it's 50-50 if he moves on or if the Fire sign him to another longer-term deal. I think, like I said, he's going to draw some interest. Maybe not from the top leagues, but I think he'll draw some interest in Europe again.
All right. And do either of you have anything else? Otherwise, we can jump to score predictions.
I wanted to ask you this. We talked last year, and the question I asked you was with regards to Kaká and the amount of money that they're paying him and utilized to bring him in. And I think last year was a no-brainer that he was worth that kind of money. You still feel that way a year later?
Ron, you want to go first or second?
I'll let you go first.
Okay. Last year I almost man-crushed on him, and Ron had to stop me. And I remember that now that you mention it. Before I wouldn't have recalled. This year my feelings are a little different. I still think, overall it's worth the money and the marketing and the following that it, whatever who was a Kaká fan from all of his journeys are, never liked MLS, probably Orlando City fans, and I think that's all great. I'm really glad for the marketing machine that's who they chose, and they picked a pretty good spot from the marketing purposes. On the field, when he's healthy, I think he's worth it, but my only hesitation to say that he's just outright worth it is we're paying him all the money, we're making him our captain, and he's playing maybe 55% of the games. So to me, the captain is someone who needs to be there week in, week out, not hurt, on the field, leading by example. That's just my personal feeling of what a captain should do, and he's not always there. And I really got agitated, and I went to social media with it about he played more minutes in the MLS All-Star game than he did for Orlando City's, I think, 3 or 4 games before that. So to me, that's not something that a captain, that's not, I understand you have to play in the game to not be suspended the next game, but the captain of the team should, I think, be close to the leader in minutes.
Yep.
So that's my take. Ron?
Yeah, I think he's still worth it. Obviously, you have to, your best ability is availability, but he's got 11 starts this year, 3 goals, 7 assists, so he's picking up either a goal or assist a game almost. I think Orlando City is far better on the attack when he's on the field, far, far, far superior when he's on the field. So yeah, if he stays healthy, but you always knew that there was this risk. He's 34, and even if he didn't have, he's had struggle with some leg injuries this year, but even if he wasn't struggling, you were going to see Kaká rested more and more this year. Orlando City ran him into the ground last year, and he earned every single penny, and he was very good last year. So we knew we were going to have to take it easier on him. So I still don't think he'd be one of our minutes leaders, even if he had to stay healthy, because we got to remember we still have how many games left in the season? Orlando City.
We have to 34, so.
Yeah, so there's
12 more, about 12 more games. Yeah,
there's 12 more games this season, and if Kaká is worn out by the last 5 or 6 games, and you miss out on a playoff run because of that, because you weren't resting him, I think it could be a blessing in disguise that he didn't play much. If Orlando City, if we get a full Kaká for the next 10 games, I think people's ideas of him change a little bit because, like I said earlier, he's still racking up assists. A lot of those are on corner kicks, but yeah, I still think he's one of the more special attacking players in this league. And with all the extra off the field stuff he brings, I can't argue with the money.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is because Fire fans here have been clamoring for a big name DP, and it's not always a surefire home run, even if you do spend that kind of money and bring in a guy.
No, and I mean,
well, I guess the only way, Kaká and the Brazilian, with the Brazilian aspect fits so well. So I guess maybe a Mexican national team player, a big star, would that be is that what fans want up there in Chicago, Guillermo?
I think fans in Chicago want a star of any sort.
Anybody.
I think it's a Mexican national because of the large Hispanic fan base here. But yeah, I think they'd be happy with anybody that's a grade higher than Sean Maloney.
and I'm gonna parlay this into another question, and we'll conclude. I'm not like an expert of the rules or the allocation money, but you could use all the money that you have in helping you bring in a DP, right?
Yeah, you can use it to bring in a DP. I mean, you're going to bring in a guy like Kaká or somebody of that nature for $7 million or whatever it is. Obviously, nobody has that kind of targeted allocation money or general allocation money to buy down. But yeah, you can use it against a DP salary.
Okay, so I'm just making sure. So there's a possibility that it happens. I mean, you guys have a whole stack of this stuff.
I think they'll make a run at somebody. They tried to take a run at Jacob Lejkowski, who's just had a good Euro 2016 for Poland, and he decided to stay in Europe and sign for Wolfsburg. So I think they'll make a run at somebody. Whether they get it done, I think that's the question. I think people aren't going to believe that they're going to sign that kind of player until they actually do it.
All right. Well, we will jump to score predictions instead of talking about speculation any further. Guillermo, thank you for coming on. It's always a pleasure. I will let you score predict first.
I will go with 1-1.
1-1. Ron, thank you for coming back this week. You've been out for a couple weeks, so I appreciate your return. You may go second.
The golden Orlando City scoreline, 2-2 draw. I like being right, and Orlando City doesn't win very often on the road, and Fire isn't very good. So all of this adds up to the 2-2 scoreline that we're so used to this year.
Okay. All right. Well, we aren't going to get it done this week. Doesn't seem to matter. We catch teams in slumps, and they find their way against us. And I think Chicago's been on a slump for a while, especially coming off the Open Cup, and I just don't see a win in our system. I don't know what the center back pairing is, and it really concerns me that it changes, and when it doesn't change, that it's just terrible. So I'm going to go 2-1 Chicago. Guillermo, I believe everybody who watches this show from me knows where to find you at this point. I think this is like the 5th show you've done with us, but if you'd like to tell everybody again.
It's at Fire Conf on Twitter and at chicagonow.com/fire for Fire Confidential.
All right. Thank you, Guillermo. I really appreciate it. Ron, your turn.
City Soccer Talk, mainly just on Twitter right now. We're on a little hiatus from our podcast, but you can see me most every week on this show and usually a lot during the games and after the games on Twitter. So, yeah, that's me.
All right. You guys are watching this. You know where to find me. That's all for our time. Thank you for your time. Peace out.
Pleasure as always, guys.
All right. Thanks again.